Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. Winter is coming. It looks like House of the Dragon Season 2 will be bringing back the White Walkers and the Night King based on a recent teaser and some new footage of what's going on up in the north and what's going on with House Stark at the Wall. I know there are a lot of questions about what the White Walkers were doing around this period in history hundreds of years before the events on the main show, so we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. I'll be doing bonus videos until we get to Season 2. They're supposed to be releasing it around this time next year, like around the time that Season 1 came out, that part of the year. During the last few months, one of the biggest new locations House of the Dragon has been filming Season 2 episodes was up in the north, and for all the House Stark, the Cregan Stark storyline that they'll be adapting from the Dance of the Dragons, they also just cast Cregan Stark too, so I'll talk about him later in the video. Unlike Jon Snow, he will know a few things, but expect a lot more Easter eggs for stuff that'll be happening later in the timeline during the time of Jon Snow and Daenerys.
He won't be a boy forever. And winter is coming.
The whole idea, though, is that Cregan Stark was a huge ally of Rhaenyra's during the dance and helps them a lot through the rest of what will be the series, like all the rest of the seasons. They teased that at the end of Season 1. Jacaerys agreed to fly his dragon Vermax to Winterfell to try and win him to their cause. I've already done a ton of videos about Cregan Stark and what's happening with him during this part of the timeline, like what's happening with House Stark just in general, so I'll link those at the end of this and down in the description below. During the big time jump in House of the Dragon, Cregan Stark kind of went through his own version of what Rhaenyra is going through right now up in the north.
What of Storm's End and Winterfell?
There has never lived a Stark who forgot an oath, and with House Stark, the North will follow.
So he's very sympathetic to what is happening to Rhaenyra right now in present day. But when they just started filming these episodes, you can see all the House Stark soldiers, the other men marching through the snow, all the snowy wooded areas around the north, and you look at this footage, and it seems like they would also be visiting the Wall in the Night's Watch at some point during the season. This would actually be the first time we've seen the Wall since the main show, Game of Thrones, because they changed the intro. They used to reference the Wall in all the Game of Thrones intros. The new opening scene is meant to be of the Valyrian Freehold, showing the Targaryen bloodline. Sort of like a really cool 3D family history. I've already done many videos breaking down all the different Easter eggs and the way that they changed the House of the Dragon intro to each episode during my episode videos for Season 1. So you can watch those again if you want to learn how they changed the intro for each episode. Basically, anytime anybody dies or anybody is born, they change the intro. But at this point in the timeline on House of the Dragon, much closer to the time of Aegon the Conqueror, even though he died way before the events of the show, the Night's Watch is way more powerful, even though the many castles and the forts that existed along the Wall have fallen into disrepair, and not all of them are manned regularly anymore. Right now, at this point in history, there's just way more attention on bolstering the forces of the Night's Watch. So it was much bigger at this point than it was about 200 years later when the events of the main show pick up. We mostly have Aegon the Conqueror to thank for that, with his dragon dream about the Long Night, the White Walkers, the Night's King, his prophecy of a Song of Ice and Fire. And around the time they were filming these scenes up in the north, someone released a picture of them putting together undead characters. So zoom, enhance, that would be for whites. So it seems like House of the Dragon will be referencing actual whites, White Walkers, the Night King, just in general at some point during Season 2. There were so many Easter eggs for the Long Night during Season 1, it makes sense that they would just do more stuff for that in Season 2. Next big question everybody has is, yes, the White Walkers were still active after the first Long Night, even at this point in history. It's just that they weren't as active until much closer to the time leading up to the main show. Charting the timeline a little bit, in the books it's a little bit different. The first Long Night was about 8,000 years ago. On the show they changed that and just said it was more like 1,000 years ago. So for the purposes of House of the Dragon, you have to use the show's timeline just because it's basing everything on the original Game of Thrones show. What happened after the first Long Night is that Bran Stark's ancestor, called Bran the Builder, was the King of Winter at the time, the King in the North, King in the North. This is long before Aegon's conquest, so there are many different kings in different realms all over Westeros. Bran the Builder is not meant to be time-traveling, three-eyed raven Bran. That was a theory for a long time, but it's not true. It's just one of his ancestors. Bran wasn't named for him either. He was named for his uncle Brandon Stark, Ned's older brother who was killed by the Mad King, along with his father Rickard Stark, which started Robert's Rebellion. Bran the Builder worked with the Children of the Forest, the Giants, the other survivors from the first Long Night to build the wall and enchant it with the Children of the Forest magic, preventing the Night King, the White Walkers, from crossing to the south. The actual construction of the wall took way longer than Bran the Builder's lifetime. You have to remember, this is like 1,000 years ago. It stretches 300 miles from Eastwatch by the Sea to the Shadow Tower on the west coast, and they built 19 large castles at equal intervals along it, manning them with 10,000 men at the very beginning of the Night's Watch. That's the most powerful that they ever were. The whole idea, though, is that during the first long night, they killed the White Walkers and the Whites, but not the Night King himself. So he survives to slink off to the lands of Always Winter and just go dormant long enough to cause the realm to slowly forget about him. Slowly, he begins to turn into a legend, and some people in the north just begin to talk of him in tales, kind of like old Nan's tales.
Fear is for the long night. Thousands of years ago, there came a night that lasted a generation. The White Walkers came for the first time, riding their dead horses, hunting with their packs of pale spiders, big as hounds.
Not expecting to see spiders big as hounds on House of the Dragon, but that would be really cool. What wound up happening is that over time, the different kings around the realm would send fewer and fewer men supplies to replenish the forces along the wall because they didn't think that there was that much threat. And over time, people started to forget about the White Walkers, the Night King, and started to believe that the wall was built to keep the free folk out of the south. So that's where most of their attention lay. There were also other races, other things in the north that the Night's Watch were trying to keep from coming south, like the Thens, for example. So over time, the Night's Watch forces begin to dwindle. They aren't able to maintain all 19 castles, and some of them start falling apart until you get closer to present day during House of the Dragon in the main show, where they only have enough men to man 3 castles. Castle Black in the middle, East Watch by the Sea, and then on the west coast, the Shadow Tower. There was some evidence of White Walker activity during that giant gap in history between the building of the wall and present day. The 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch was called the Night King, who's said to have taken a White Walker bride, led forces of whites against his former Night's Watch brothers, but then was defeated with the help of the wildlings at the time. That legend is probably based on the 13th Lord Commander being turned into a White Walker by the Night King, who we know survived and just became more active at that point briefly in history and attempted to break through the wall unsuccessfully. After that, the Night's King would have got a little more dormant until he developed his new plan that he continued to use up to present day, forming pacts with different people in the north to sacrifice their male children to him in exchange for immunity from the White Walkers. Closer to present day, the Night King was using Craster's male children for his forces. That's why many of the White Walkers in present day serving under him are actually Gilly's brothers. There were lots of memes and jokes about this when the main show was going on. We never actually saw Gilly reference this verbally, but she probably eventually made the connection in the background just because she was able to help Samwell discover that Jon Snow was actually the child of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen, so she could probably figure out that most of the White Walkers were her brothers. But before Craster lived, the Night King would have made pacts like this with previous Northmen, and over time, I think the idea is that occasionally White Walkers would be killed, he'd use new sacrifices to replenish his forces, and just slowly building them to present day on the main show when his army grew big enough to assault the wall again. What winds up happening is that hundreds and hundreds of years go by with the realm eventually forgetting about the White Walkers, focusing on the free folk until Aegon the Conqueror's time, about 115 years before the events on House of the Dragon. One night, Aegon has his dragon dream about the second long night in the Night King, the White Walkers. Later, they call the prophecy a Song of Ice and Fire. He etches the prophecy onto his Valyrian dagger with the help of the Valyrian pyromancers and passes the blade and the knowledge of the dragon dream to his successors from king to successive king. His whole reason for conquering the Seven Kingdoms was because he felt like the realm would not be strong enough to defeat them unless it was united. And after he finishes conquering Westeros and moves the capital to King's Landing, he spends most of the rest of his life traveling around to each of the 6 realms because Dorne wasn't conquered yet, they hated him still, and there were still minor skirmishes that he had to put out, but he flew around on his dragon, Balerion the Black Dread, also putting renewed interest on the wall, boosting the Night's Watch forces. That focus on the wall the Night's Watch continued through the time of King Jaehaerys, who is Rhaenyra's great-grandfather. They don't reference the wall of the Night's Watch that much during the events of Season 1 when her father Viserys was king. But we learned that he was obsessed with the prophecy, so he would have also kept a lot of importance on maintaining the Night's Watch during his reign. It was just that he didn't tell anyone until Rhaenyra why he felt like the Night's Watch was so important. Later in Season 1, when Rhaenyra finally tells Daemon about the White Walkers and the prophecy, she references the fact that part of the reason for wanting to be queen so badly is so that she can defend the realm against this threat of the Night King and the White Walkers. George R. Martin said that after Aegon's dragon dream, nobody actually knew when the next long night would come, so each king that came along and learned of the prophecy would assume that it could happen at any moment. So you have to picture Viserys sitting there at all times just thinking the long night could happen at any moment, and now Rhaenyra is kind of doing the same thing. So in present day during the Dance of the Dragons, it's not so much that Rhaenyra wants to be queen purely out of selfishness, she's also worried about the White Walkers, and because the Greens don't know about it yet Aegon II hasn't been told the prophecy, she feels like the realm will fall. But because we know that it won't happen until more than 200 years later, and there were no major reports about huge White Walker battles between the Dance of the Dragons and present day, It's likely that if we see them during Season 2, it'll only be a few of them, and it might be more like the White Walkers in the opening scene from Game of Thrones Season 1. Like the show started with the scene of the Night's Watch finding the dead bodies made into ancient symbols referencing the children of the forest, then they were all killed except for one of them. We might get a scene kind of like that. The other major news is that they finally cast Cregan Stark. He's being played by Tom Taylor. I've already done a bunch of Cregan Stark videos, so I'll link those at the end of this and down in the description below. Once we get a picture of him in actual costume, like in full makeup, I'll do a first look video. Just assuming that they will color his hair brown because the seed is strong to make more Jon Snow jokes. A lot of people asked about this, why Jon Snow doesn't have white Targaryen customary hair. It's because the genetic trait for brown hair is more dominant than the trait for white hair. So for example, if Jon Snow and Daenerys were to have a child, that child would also probably have brown hair. There's an awful lot of fan art of that too, like what it would look like if they actually had children, and most of them have the white hair, which is technically incorrect. It would be brown hair. Once all the strike stuff in Hollywood gets settled, George R. Martin and HBO will start making more announcements about Season 2, the other Game of Thrones prequels and spin-offs that they're working on. There's still almost 7, only 1 or 2 have actually been canceled. Most of them are still in stages of different development. The next big Game of Thrones series that they confirmed they'll be releasing will be the Night of the Seven Kingdoms one based on the Tales of Dunk and Egg. I've already done a teaser trailer video for that. Click here to watch that, learn what's going on with that series, and click here to learn what's going on with Cregan Stark and House Stark during the events of House of the Dragon Season 2. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.